All right, welcome to this week's episode of our Shotmaker podcast. I'm excited because I thought we had a really good conversation last week, right? Talking about some really interesting ways to build your team without having to spend so many dollars up front. So now we're sort of going to continue that conversation because we've had some big developments.
Yeah, we figured we had a good time talking about Ohtani.
Yes.
And it goes on a week later because we're not done talking about Ohtani. Because if you look at the news hot off the press, the Dodgers just spent a lot more money. I mean, not compared to Ohtani, but another $325 million for Yamamoto, right? The other player coming from Japan has never pitched in the Major League Baseball at all.
Right.
And 12 years, $325 million. They just added another, huge piece to their puzzle, their team.
Right. So do you think, you play devil's advocate, they would have gotten Yamamoto without Ohtani, or do you think they're coming together? What do you think?
Well, I think as they come from the same country, they probably had, don't need translators to talk together. So there's probably some benefit to that. But I would assume that the money was part of it, but there were probably a bunch of teams offering that same money, right? They said the Phillies were in on that, and the Yankees, right? There are some big names that were offering probably a ton of money.
Okay.
So my guess was that would be the tiebreaker, right? You had somebody that you wanted to go play with.
Yeah. And like you said before, which was interesting, kind of bringing it back to business, that whole idea of expectation. Right now, even the other players are expecting that you're going to win the World Series pretty easily. So it's an interesting thing to think about and like adding pressure in some ways, but now you also have more talent. So.
Right. And we've seen this in basketball before, right? When LeBron brings his friends to come play with him. So it's not new that superstars want to play with each other. But baseball wasn't normally like that because, right, you need so many players.
Right.
It's not like basketball, you put 5 guys on the court.
Right.
Baseball, football, you need, but, I think that's what we're starting to see is they're like, hey, well, we can go play together.
Yeah.
And hopefully have a really successful team.
Well, and you brought up a really interesting point as you relate it back to business, which is the whole idea of not just good players want to play together, but like good employees want to work together. So, what is that intrinsic? Like, yes, they had to spend a lot of money to get Ohtani, but now you have, like, it's going to cause your team to step up in ways that's sort of an intangible, right? You can't really see on paper what the team would have been next year without him or with him, but it probably is going to drive them to work harder. Now they all got to fight for spots a little harder, and it'll be interesting to see how that sort of feeds off itself.
Yeah, we talked directly to like a restaurant, like we talked last week, is maybe that new GM that you were in love with, that you really wanted was going to cost more, but all those other factors that we talked about last week, but the other factor is, managers are going to want to work for that GM because that GM's good, not because he's friendly, whatever, funny, but he's probably a really good general manager by either taking care of them, teaching them, developing them, and that's going to build your management team, which will then trickle down to your staff, right? Like servers stay, and I've always seen that work for managers that they want to work for, and I think that's where it kind of full circle in that. Yes, you did maybe you paid a lot more than you thought for that original part, but maybe the service you're getting at the table now is so much more, so great because of it.
Well, and I think you're right. Like that also brings up, like we talk a lot about interviewing. You guys talk a lot about interviewing and some of the consulting work you do. But, it's a good point to say if you have 2 candidates and one has a network of people they're in contact with, they're well respected by their former, and sometimes it's hard to say, right? You're not going to ask someone, do your former, coworkers like you? But it's interesting to see if they bring that up because I think, that's part of building a team is like, okay, now can you call in a good back of house guy that you knew or, bring in people and all of a sudden build your own team that could be successful.
And that's definitely part of it. I mean, I've saw it for many years as, you bring maybe a kitchen manager over, and next thing you know, 3 or 4 really good line cooks follow them. And then you kind of know you made the right decision, right? Like, that person's pretty good. He said he was good. Yeah, okay. Everyone always says you're going to bring all this staff with you. But then it happens, you're like, he was true. He did bring it over with him. So
I agree. It elevates it. And then I think, so then the next question for this, I would say this, Ohtani effect part 3 is, will all of the egos under the pressure, work together? Because, we've seen cases where it did. the Patriots when they back in the day.
Sure.
You've seen the Celtics. You've had teams that just gelled with a lot of, egos. But then on the flip side, you've had a lot of teams that didn't. So
right, and we've seen it many times where the best on paper doesn't always win, and I think that's where, whether it's the leadership of the player you're bringing in or in the restaurant, the leadership of the GM, that's what you're paying for.
Yeah.
That they're going to be able to make that team work together and give everyone a really good role, a very defined role, so everyone's not just kind of bouncing off each other.
Yeah. And I think you see this a lot in, I would say, kind of comparing it to like the new restaurant, right? New restaurant in town. It's beautiful. Like everyone wants to go check it out. They have a really expensive management team that they brought in from all over. And I think what these guys are going to be up against is everybody's gunning for you. Everybody's kind of like waiting for your mistake, and I think that's something they're all going to have to deal with. Now you have to live with this expectation, because how many fans are going to think, it's nothing, right? Like we're going to win.
Right. Yeah, now really, we told last week, but really now winning a World Series is really the only option. I think if you go and lose, you still are like a failure. You're like, at this point, right? Like,
Patriots versus Giants.
Yeah, like it's just completely like you won every game of the season, but you didn't win the last one. It was a failure. Don't talk about it. Like shun that team.
And these guys even more because of what you've spent. And, it's a lot. And, so what would you say, because you've worked a lot, like, led teams, like how do you manage that extra? How do you get them focused back on like, hey guys, it's spring training. Like we haven't even played our first game.
Oh, I've done a lot of restaurant openings where, like you said, you're getting it's restaurant opening, it's corporate restaurant opening. It's very important for it to go well at the beginning.
Yes.
And a lot of points at the head. Everything has to be great, and there's a lot of investment that goes in, not just on the building and all that, but the team.
Yeah.
So I'm taking the best manager from there. I'm taking the best manager from there. And next thing you know, like you said, you have maybe 3 or 4 of the best managers of other restaurants now all wanting to be the next in line at this restaurant. But the goal is they all have to do a great job. Yeah. In the corporate world, sometimes it's easier because like, hey, you can all get promoted to general manager just going somewhere else. Yeah. But in the immediate future is you're judged on the success of that restaurant. Yeah. So I don't care how good this one manager is at writing a schedule or running a shift. If the restaurant results are not good, it's irrelevant. I think as long as you create that culture from the beginning, then the team understands that they can be the most they can know every recipe, and it doesn't matter. If the restaurant's not running well, their promotion kind of is still reflected by that.
Right, and I think that's a great point. I think, whatever you've done, especially if it's, big investments, big goals, right, brought in this dream team, it is getting everyone back to, like, what's your role, right? What's success to that back of house role? Like, don't worry about the front of house, don't worry about all that. Like, how is your role the most successful? And then collectively, everybody will win.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the Dodgers, right, what is each individual player going to have their own goals of maybe home runs or wins and average? Sure. And they're going to need to do that to get to where they want to go.
Right.
But I think, there's only going to be one pitcher that can pitch the first game of the season, right?
Right.
One opening day starter. There's only one shortstop. Only one cleanup hitter. So someone's going to be in a spot that they may not have been before.
Yes.
Right? If in this year, Ohtani won't be pitching. But next year, right, he comes back. If he's your number one's now your number 2.
Yeah.
And that's okay. As long as it's okay.
As long as the ego part, which, and I think that's where as a leader, being aware of the egos that are on your team, because there's definitely going to be some in that manager role. And then, making sure that they're in check and they're working together before the big day.
Yeah, just having those really candid, honest conversations. I've done many times with managers of, hey, you just weren't ready to be maybe the number 2 in charge yet. Doesn't mean you're not doing a good job. It doesn't mean we don't think you care. It doesn't mean we don't think you could get there. But in this moment in time, it just wasn't. The restaurant needed somebody else is why we brought them in. You will have your chance in the future if you do what you're supposed to do.
And that's where I think, fundamentally the lesson, especially the last 2 weeks, is, okay, we want to invest in a big team. We want to pay the dollars that it's going to take to get the job done. But I think it's also, in both situations, you still need a good coach.
Right.
You still need a good leader, someone who is helping move it forward. Right. It's not like the Dodger coach is just going to I'm done. Right? It's like, I don't need to do anything. No, it's the opposite, right? In some respects, because you've sort of shaken it up, done something different, gotten people talking. So I think it's that same expectation as the owners, even if you're spending all this money, right? You still have a role here to lead the team, be strategic, drive it forward to where you want to go. Otherwise, it won't get there, even with the best talent.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, especially as I said, you might have 5 great managers. Maybe you don't even have a GM. Maybe the owner is technically the GM. But if you're not managing those 5 managers, they're going to be bouncing off each other. They're going to think that they're all the head, whatever it is, and it's not going to go
going
well.
back to the dugout. Like, it can happen very easily, no matter what you're spending.
I mean, it's very important that someone, even down to a shift. I mean, from the restaurant business, like each shift there was a leader. So, right, because there could be 2 times where 2 managers are equal in seniority, they're equal whatever, but they're both together in that shift. Well, someone's got to be the final decision maker.
Yeah.
Because if not, what's going to happen, right? I tell you can go home, you told them you can't go home, and now it's mom versus dad. So, so same thing as we get to baseball or that. Someone today is batting leadoff, someone's not.
Yeah.
Someone today is the head of the shift, someone today is not. Maybe tomorrow it's your turn. It doesn't matter how you do it, but it is ever changing. But whether it's an owner or a GM, someone's got to be getting that message down, or it's just not going to, the message won't be clear.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the biggest difference between business and sports. I think in business, we sometimes forget that regardless of the team, that leader is so important. And that, having that culture, having those, decisions, making sure the team respects the decision, that they know where they're going. I mean, in sports, in some ways, it's easy, right? We know where they are, where they're going, right? Everybody does. The whole world does. But in business, sometimes we don't, right? Like, does your team know where you want to go? Does your team know why you're bringing in this big salary person? Or, it's not just like, oh, it's someone here, but it's really driving us forward to X place. And I think that's where, as we get to next year, looking at our team, being creative, like I talked about before, thinking about the intangibles of what else that would bring to the table, but really drawing out what do we want for our business for the next 3 years, and could this powerhouse team be the missing link to get us there?
Yeah, I agree.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode, and we will see you next week.